Hey, my. Welcome back to that 70s card show. My name is John Keating, and I thank you for joining me as I take a look back at the cards and the culture of the very colorful 1970s. There was a time back then, a more simple time in our hobby, and it was quite a wonderful time, that's for sure. So, this is episode 80. We're going to talk a little bit about wrapping up uh, the 70s series I just did with a bunch of incredible collectors and people that I love to watch, consume their content, and enjoy friendship with. We're also going to wrap up this podcast. This is the end of the road for the podcast and YouTube shows for that 70s card show. As they say, it's better to burn out than to fade away. So that will be it for this episodic version of that 70s card show. Talk about the 70s again. The series had some great people on: Mark Cooter, two Chris's, Mike, Terry, Dean, Andrew, Ed, and of course, Dr. Jim. Dr. Jim, we talked a little bit about how the seismic shift in the hobby happened right about the late 70s, 79 in particular, and then going into the 80s. And that's kind of why we're wrapping this whole thing up here. We turned the corner into 1980 and the 80s. The 70s kind of, the hippies grew up to be yuppies in the 80s. It's kind of the way baseball was as well. There was fewer rebels and more conformers. Single superstars kind of went by the wayside, and team play was definitely in vogue in the 1980s. You look at the dynasties of the 80s, right? Our Yankees, our Reds, our A's, and then of course on the peripheral there, Pirates and Orioles floating about. Less of that in the 80s in baseball, that's for sure. I think there was only one champion that won twice in the 80s, and I believe that was the Los Angeles Dodgers, with two very different teams um, in two different parts of the decade. Baseball would kind of enjoy its last hurrah, I would say, in 1980. Phillies, Royals, of course, World Series. 81 would be a strike, and of course, further on down the road, as the band said in The Last Waltz, further on down the road, uh, football would kind of overtake baseball. I think Joe Montana and the 49ers. You had your Elways, you had your Marinos, all that fun stuff. So by the end of the decade, um, more NFC fun with the Redskins and Giants and all that fun stuff. So hockey, even hockey made a big splash in the 80s with the dawn of the great Wayne Gretzky and his dominance over the sport. And basketball, of course, I think that basketball in the 80s was absolutely incredible, both on the professional level and in the college level. So baseball kind of didn't have this thing to its own anymore as far as the hearts and minds of Americans. One of the big parts of that, or something that played a big role in that, I think, was the Olympics, the Lake Placid Olympics in 1980, semifinal game, USA versus the Soviet Union. And it was, I tell people that game was like every city's team or everybody's team playing in the Super Bowl all at once, because everybody was united in this country behind one sports team, which truly is a rare phenomenon as far as Americans go, because we have such strong, robust leagues, but very rarely do our national teams, or really national teams up to that point, would have been mostly amateurs or all amateurs. Very rarely did we rally around one cause like that. Semifinal win against the Soviets and the eventual gold medal. So fun times there. Basketball, again, awesome. Football, all these sports other than baseball kind of were reaping what they'd sowed with consolidation of their various leagues, the ABA, NBA, the World Hockey Association, or whatever those freaks called it over there, and the NHL, and of course football, AFL, NFL, and the whatever WFL at one point as well. So those sports kind of grew up a little bit, took a little bit of the luster off of baseball. Baseball kept chugging along, of course. And then, more importantly, in our hobby, 81 was the Whopper when Fleer and Donruss came aboard. And by the end of the decade, we'd have Upper Deck and Score and all their various sub brands, and really changed the way the hobby and collectors went about their business. One example of that is the proliferation of complete sets. Instead of building sets by hand, you could buy sets. There was the traded sets that became the norm year after year by each manufacturer. And shows blew up. Card shows absolutely blew up. I was probably most active um, up until the last couple of years. I was probably most active in the 80s with my collecting. I have all the sets right there from the 80s. And yeah, so 80s, huge time in the hobby. Beckett magazine would come around, and Tough Stuff and all the other magazines. And by the end of the 80s, of course, we would have so many cards at our disposal. And as anybody who buys cards knows, there's still no shortage of finding those cards to this day, whether you're at card shops or on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or eBay. There are so many cards from that era floating about. So seismic shift in the hobby in the 80s. The 90s, of course, I think the probably the finest design decade of baseball cards or sports cards in general. Wonderfully creative minds at work in the 90s in the art department, not necessarily in the sales and marketing side of it, but good times in the 90s. And of course, we are where we are today because of all that. So that's that. That's our big kind of like the bow on the present that was the 70s. I will still tell you that the 70s were the greatest decade in baseball for the same reasons as when I started this whole mess. That is, free agency came on board. Obviously, the DH, which is even still playing a role in the game, and even on a more prominent basis now that the National League has adopted it. A lot of stuff going on there, uniforms and all that fun stuff. So free agency was probably the biggest contribution, but personalities as well, right? We know sports personalities, I would say, prior to the 1970s, probably the only sports personality that was a true personality on his own was Muhammad Ali. And coming out of the 70s and beyond, obviously individuals started to play a more prominent role in the headlines and stuff like that. So 70s, love them. We'll never leave them. And yeah, that's that. So let's talk about the end of the road here on this show, that 70s card show. Now, as we know, or maybe you don't know, it takes a lot of time and effort to do one of these things. And I've found that the time and effort tend to take away from my ability to enjoy collecting and my ability or my urge to enjoy content. There's expenses involved, podcast hosting, there's StreamYard, all that fun stuff. So even though we turn this thing on and talk for a while, it takes a while. It does take a little bit of a machine to keep it running. Not a lot, but still $50 a month is $50 a month when you add everything in, plus your time and all that fun stuff. So I always joke about sponsorship and currently sponsored by nobody. That comes from the great Neil Young. And Neil Young made a video, This Note's for You, in the 80s. It ran once on MTV and then was pulled from circulation due to the uproar or the offense it caused to some of the people that Neil was kind of parodying, or as my young son used to say, parodying. So there was some parodies going on there. And Michael Jackson's representatives supposedly called MTV, said, yank that video or you'll never get another video from us again. So that happened. And then guess who won the Video Music Awards by the end of that year? And that was Neil Young for his "This Note's for You" video. I urge you guys to watch that. Good times. And remember, that was the era where Pepsi and Budweiser and Miller Lite and all that stuff was filled with celebrity endorsers. So it's not that I have a huge thing against sponsorship and stuff like that, but it's kind of ingrained in within me. When I was working for Neil Young, he would have people go around, not me, but the venue people go around and cover up beer signs and stuff like that with what we call duvetine, or some cheap fabric, so that he didn't have to see beer signs while he was playing in their venue. So it's kind of beaten into me to be a little cynical of corporate America, or corporate Earth, I guess it is now. So not necessarily opposed to sponsorship, but I'm pretty sensitive to the amount of sponsorship we are exposed to in our daily lives. And one of the things, I was approached early on about sponsorship, and I turned it down because I try to be. I'm very cynical, obviously, so I turned it down and did until doing further research, and it turns out it was the right thing to do with that particular company for sure. But if I had to have sponsors for this show, I could tell you I have 4 of them lined up here, and that's SGC. SGC is where I get my cards graded, and I have one small complaint about SGC, but I think company-wise, the product that they deliver is far superior to anything out there. I think it's a wonderful look, and I use their services to preserve my cards. Grades are grades, but I use their services to protect my cards, that's for sure. And it could be anybody, but it just happens to be that I like them. I like their customer service. I like their prices, and I like their turnaround time. So there really is very little to be picky about with that. And from what I've heard, SGC has sponsored a lot of uh, content or hobby content programs, but you really wouldn't know it, because I've heard a rumor that they simply say, just do your thing. We'll sponsor you. You can be critical of us and all that stuff. So I like a company like that, that isn't that sensitive that they can't hear criticisms. So I would take SGC in a heartbeat if I had the reach that they required to for them to make an investment. The only criticism I have of SGC is the fact that when you send your cards to SGC, and when they send your cards back to you in a timely manner, you're sending it to SGC at such and such address in Boca Raton. I think that maybe they should probably change that and come up with a Fugazi company name, so that every Tom, Dick, and Harry who's handling your package, as they say, doesn't see SGC on there, and doesn't think, wow, this could end up disappearing somewhere in the back of my truck. So SGC, that's the criticism there. Change your shipping name. Make it a little harder on those folks, that's for sure. Because I know of some people, some of those crazy Cub fans up there in the Midwest, who seem to always be surprised about cold weather this time of year. They've had some cards taken from them from SGC in transit. They're with SGC prominently displayed on the labels in transit. So stop that crap, all right, SGC. Huggins and Scott would be my auction sponsor. I've used Huggins and Scott. I like Huggins and Scott because it's not just about the slab or a slab or this, that, or the other thing. You can get some really good lots, and you can get their auction pretty much. I don't know how many times they do it, 3 or 4 times a year, but there's something in there for everybody. And I like to buy bulk lots, and I've had success with them buying bulk lots of old cards and oddball cards and stuff like that. So I like that process. Easy auction system. The interface is a little war games type, but it's okay. You don't need any fancy things happening when all you want is the card. So Huggins and Scott, you're okay in my book. I've told all of you folks that I use Beckett OPG. Now, Beckett OPG is probably it's where I store my cards. A lot of people use trading card database. I can't get the hang of that. I use that a lot for reference material, but I'm not on board there with loading in my collection. But Beckett OPG has my entire collection, and they've got about, I don't know, I have a box behind me out of a couple 100,000 cards. I have a box behind me somewhere on those shelves that has maybe 300 cards in it that Beckett doesn't have, but most of those are Nolan Ryan Broder cards from the 1990s. So, with that said, Beckett OPG has a very vast database. Prices aren't always up to date, but there's a lot of information and a lot of checklists on there. It could be a lot better. Beckett OPG could give me a free subscription for a year, and then they could like pick somebody's brain and say, "Hey, what would you do better here on our platform?" And I could tell them a bunch of things. So there's a little bit of a disappointment there, but I'm way invested in Beckett OPG, just like other people are way invested in the PSA set registry. So I kind of feel the pain and the sympathy there with those folks because you log a couple 100,000 cards into your data. You log a couple 100,000 cards into their database, and you're kind of stuck with what they give you. Last sponsor that I would have if I were the sponsoring kind would be Collectibles Insurance. Really, really, you should have your collection insured, and that's not just for it being under your roof, but also for other stuff like if you're shipping stuff or selling stuff and all that stuff. You should have collection. You should have collector's insurance. You can have a homeowner's policy as well if you want, but get some collector's insurance for sure because you know put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and Collectibles Insurance Service lets me sleep at night a little bit better. I've got alarms, I've got animals, I've got weapons, I've got a safety deposit box, I've got all that stuff that I would normally use to protect my things, but it's just another layer of kind of peace of mind as these cards get more and more expensive, and as we accumulate more and more things. So, Collectibles Insurance Services, get some of that. It's kind of, I would say it's fairly cost effective. And I will tell you that I don't insure my entire collection for its perceived book value because that's not cost effective to insure 20-cent junk wax era cards when it's just not worth it. If they go, they go. I can get new ones. I can buy a 91 Fleer set or an 88 Donruss set anywhere for $5. So it doesn't make sense for me to insure that stuff. But get some insurance, peace of mind, all that fun stuff. So here we are talking about sponsorships and stuff like that. One of the things when I decided to kind of that helped me decide to kind of tie this whole thing up and end it is I'm finding myself consuming more or less and less content, and of course that makes me want to create less and less content as well. Sponsorship is one thing like I said, I'm sensitive to, and some shows have turned into that were once listenable by me, and I'm pretty finicky, but I would listen to a lot of shows, but some of these shows have become unlistenable, whether they're auction watches or every show is 5-minute ad starts, 2-minute talk, 5 more minutes of ads. So I'm having a hard time consuming content these days. I think that there's way too much random advertising happening. I'm not talking about YouTube commercials and stuff like that. That's out of our hands, but podcasts in particular that are essentially feels like you're watching or listening to a NASCAR talk to you with all the logos on it and all that stuff. So regardless, I've found myself listening to less, consuming less because of we're just inundated with advertisements throughout our day. And then here you go, you want to check out in your hobby and relax and learn some things. And what do you get? You get more advertisements and layer upon layer of advertisement, or an entire show dedicated to auction watching on a platform that sponsors your podcast. I don't understand how that benefits any of us, truth be told. That may seem a little controversial, but that's just the way I feel. People like Dr. Jim, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, does it the right way. He tells us his sponsors at the beginning of the episode, and then it's over. It's 15 seconds of that. Occasionally, he'll sponsor product on the program, a box break or something, but that makes sense because you're learning about the product as we go as well. So, of course, Dr. Jim could do no wrong in most of our eyes, but that's another example right there of being able to have sponsorship, yet not have it consume your program. Truth be told, I'm probably listening to Golden Age of Cardboard and Dr. James Beckett's Sports Card Insights and on podcast, and that's about it. I can't listen to any more of this stuff. I spent a good part of Monday or maybe Sunday unsubscribing to a lot of podcasts on my iPhone. YouTube content is wonderful. It's awesome. I think that's great. A lot of education going on there. Tends to be a little bit of show and tell. If you have a 5, I know somebody's got a 6. If I have a 6, I know somebody's got a 7. If I've got an 8, I know somebody's got a 9. So, we all know what the cards look like. We all see the cards. Obviously, I prefer educational shows like Terry Mack and Chris, Stories and Cardboard, who can put a card up there and talk about a card for 15 minutes and keep my attention. Dean is another one. Dean was on my show recently. I just love hearing about cards, and I don't necessarily care that you have that some people have 4s, some people have 5, some people have 6s. Collecting to me is like growing a lawn. When I moved into this house 23 years ago, all I had was dirt around my house, and all I wanted was a lawn. I just wanted it to grow. I didn't care what the blades looked like, whether they were perfect blades of grass, whether there were weeds in there. And that's kind of like my collection. I just want my collection to grow and look good from where I'm looking at. Sure, you get down onto your hands and knees and you'll see some dandelions in there and some other stuff, but it looks good from arm's length. And we always talk about arm's length in this hobby. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I'm growing a lawn. I'm not growing the perfect blade or blades of grass. Got kids that play on it, got dogs that poop on it, but it's still my lawn, and that's how I like to approach that. And then another thing in content world is the experts. There's some experts out there that call themselves experts. I got a little tidbit. The only advice I'm going to give you is if someone's calling themselves an expert, then chances are they're not. We know who the experts are. We know who the people are that have the knowledge. And a lot of collectors and a lot of industry people fall into those categories. They have the knowledge and they're able to convey that. But certainly turned off by people that say, I'm here to teach you guys a thing or two. The whole thing about the reason I started this podcast was to teach myself about the 70s more. I mean, I grew up in the 70s. I started collecting in the 70s, so I had a base there, but I certainly didn't know it anywhere nearly as well as I do now after having done some research, learned from guests that I've had, and then, of course, learned from the listeners, which have been absolutely amazing on this show. So gaining knowledge was my only goal when I started this thing. I didn't want to become a personality, and thankfully I don't think that that's happened because I'm a very I know I'm an acquired taste and I'm not for everybody, but mission accomplished. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from listeners to this program and, like I said, guests. So that went down. I'm a better collector now. Like, there are things in the 70s that sets and cards that I'm not aware of that were around when I was collecting back then, or even in the 80s or 90s. So I'm a better collector now, and that's taken me to other decades as well. I'm more in tune with other decades. You can get the TCMA 50 set, right, which was made in the 70s, and now you learn more about the 50s, and now you're going to collect more 50s cards, especially of some of those players. So I've become a better collector. I've learned a lot. And something that I absolutely, on a stack of on a stack of magic underwear. I promise you, I never anticipated happening, and that was friends, the friendships that I've gained simply through this program, which baffles me. I'm not a friend of the world to people. I'm a loner. I've said it. I'm an introvert. I'm an outlier. I'm not a joiner. All that fun stuff. So somehow people have come, a very select few people, but people have come to accept me for how I am, and I can't tell you how I appreciate that, how much I appreciate that. But I've gained a lot of friends, and that's people I've met in person, people I've now communicated with, whether it's reaching out to me on Facebook and we instant message, Twitter, DMs, the cell phone, emails, and in person. I've met a lot of people too. So it's been an for somebody that doesn't want to meet people, it's been a really surprising happenstance, and I'm very grateful for that, because now I have friends in my adulthood who share a passion and a joy that I thought existed only in my little world down here in my basement. So for that, I'm appreciative of, and that also caused me a little bit of consternation here, because I didn't want to let anybody down by ending this program. Not a lot of people in the broad scheme of things appear to be tuning in here, but I mean, between the podcast and YouTube, I get about 400 watches a week for an episode, and that's pretty darn amazing if you ask me. I don't need thousands. I'll take those 400 people that listen or watch that show in a dark alley fighting any army uh, in Michael Jackson Beat It style. Zip guns, knives, whatever, chains. I'll take these 400 guys and stand with them, take on anybody else's 400 guys or girls, because what an amazing bunch. Comments, again, messages, stuff like that. It's been truly. I'm not a religious guy, but it's been a blessing, and for that, I'm appreciative of probably more than anything. And I didn't want to let anybody down by stopping this whole thing, but it's kind of time to put it aside and get back to collecting more, and maybe spend some time with these new people until they get sick of me that I've accumulated. So to me, 400 people listening a week, and right now, probably thanks to that little run in the 70s, my listenership has been higher than ever. So we're not on a down slope here or anything like that. So it's probably the perfect time to say goodbye and stop this whole this madness. I don't want to make it sound like you know, I'm the producer of Friends and I can't do it anymore. I just want to ease back a little bit, maybe recapture some of that enjoyment of absorbing content and stuff like that, without the pressure of self-imposed pressure of gaining subscribers, which seems to be a big thing, gaining views and all that stuff. So watches, not that important to me. I sleep well at night, but it's just time to hang up the headphones, as they say, and take a big step back and hit these boxes behind me, sort some cards, put some of them on eBay if I have doubles, all that fun stuff. So that's that. I'd love to tell you to reach out to me, but that's a moot point now. I hope you guys and gals had a good time running back into the 70s a little bit. I think the 70s are gaining popularity, and collector wise, there's so much odd stuff there. I know a lot of people are collecting their 70s sets, so that's a good fun thing that 70s are kind of coming back in vogue a little bit. Still cheaper than the 60s, that's for sure. So hopefully you guys and gals continue on that journey, whatever your collecting journey is. Stop by the 70s rest stop every now and then and pick up a little something for your trip, because there's so much out there. So anyway, thanks for everything. 80 episodes. I think there was a little bit more than that when you count them all up, but 80 episodes, and way too many memories uh, to go over now, that's for sure. But thanks for everything. Thanks for putting up with me, and I'll see everybody around somewhere, I'm sure. So thanks all. Take care. Be safe. Be good to each other. Enjoy collecting. And more importantly, forever and ever, enjoy your collection. Thank you.